So this is Eric Loyd, master's student. I have a master's in psychology, neuropsychology concentration. I want to read an article by Sonnet M. Basco, Patrick T. Davies, and E. Mark Cummings. This one's called Beyond Warmth and Conflict: The developmental utility of a boundary conceptualization of sibling relationship processes. This article came out in 2012. Was published November of that year. This is volume 83, chapter 6, page 2121 through 2138 in the Child Development Journal. This one is about enmeshment, a concept in clinical psychology. Abstract: translating relationship boundaries conceptualizations to the study of sibling relationships. This study examined the utility of sibling enmeshment and disengagement in predicting child adjustment difficulties in a sample of 282 mothers and adolescents. The average age was 12.7 years old. Mothers completed a semi-structured interview at the first measurement occasion to assess sibling interaction patterns. Adolescents, mothers, and teachers reported on children's adjustment problems across 2 annual waves of assessment, supporting the incremental utility of a boundary conceptualization of sibling relationships. Results of latent difference scores analysis indicated that quota ratings of sibling enmeshment and disengagement uniquely predicted greater adolescent adjustment difficulties even after taking into account standard indices of sibling relationship quality, warmth, conflict, and sibling structural characteristics like sex. Sibling relationships serve as key contexts of socialization in the lives of children. Brody 2004, Dunn 2007. Research has consistently documented that sibling warmth is associated with higher levels of competence and diminished risks for internalizing and externalizing problems. Kim, McCall, Corder, and Osgood 2007, Richmond, Stalker, and Rinks 2005. Conversely, high levels of sibling conflict have been associated with greater vulnerability to a wide range of psychological problems. Garcia, Shaw, Winslow, and Yagi 2000, Moser and Jacob 2002. Decisions to focus on constructs of warmth and conflict have been largely based either implicitly or explicitly on social learning theory principles. Stalker and Youngblade 1999, Willing and Bladden 2005. Although this corpus of work has been extremely valuable in advancing and understanding of the developmental implications of sibling relationships, the predominant use on any single theory as a guide to research is likely to constrain a full understanding of sibling relationship processes. Towards increasing the conceptual breadth and richness in models of sibling relationships, the challenge of resolving a significant number of stage-salient tasks, including the development towards increasing the conceptual breadth and richness in models of sibling relationships. The goal of this study is to introduce and test the incremental value of a new conceptual approach to understanding the developmental implications of sibling relationship quality. Drawing from family systems theory, we aim to expand the traditional focus on warmth and conflict by further differentiating sibling relationship quality based on the concept of boundary disturbances, defined by aberrations in implicit relationship rules of transmitting information and resources. Cox and Paley, 1997, Minuchin, 1985. Originally developed in the context of structural family therapy, Minuchin, 1974, boundary disturbance conceptualizations have been successfully applied at an empirical level to understand both family system and subsystem, for example, parent-child dynamics, for example, Jacobowitz, Hazen, Curran, and Hitchens, 2004, Surjapal, Davies, and Cummings, 2010. Enmeshment and disengagement have been identified as the two most common boundary disturbance patterns in family relationships. Davies, Cummings, and Winter, 2004. Enmeshed relationships are characterized by underdeveloped, dispersive boundaries. Although these relationships may appear to have some degree of affection and warmth, intimacy and affiliation are achieved at the cost of autonomy, individuality, and a balanced consideration of other important goals, for example, exploration or peer relations. Barber and Buehler, 1996. High levels of emotional and psychological entanglement can be manifested in many forms, including inappropriately assuming the role of parent or caretaker, overly protective caregiving role, experiencing conditional or contingent warmth that co-occurs with high levels of controlling, dominant, and power-assertive behaviors, and heavily relying on sibling relationship to achieve certain goals, for example, affiliation or protection. Although enmeshed relationships may confer some developmental advantages under specific conditions, family systems theory proposes that enmeshment increases children's risks for internalizing symptoms by coaxing or coercing the child into a single or narrow set of relationships that undermines autonomy. Minuchin, 1985. The ensnared nature of these relationships are further theorized to present formidable challenges to developing social skills necessary for successful establishing and maintaining high quality peer relationships. In support of the potential utility of the enmeshment construct for the study of sibling relationships, Hetherington, 1988, identified an enmeshed subsample of siblings that she described as spending little time playing with other children, most of the time with each other, were interdependent and asked each other's advice on most issues, and were fiercely protective of each other. Page 326. Consistent with her interpretation that this dynamic reflected an unhealthy or pathologically intense symbiotic and restrictive relationship, Hetherington, 1988, reported that children in enmeshed sibling relationships exhibited elevated levels of internalizing problems and peer neglect. Guided by this work and the broader research on boundary conceptualizations in the larger family, Davies et al. 2004, Jacobowitz et al. 2004, Surjapal et al. 2010. We hypothesized that sibling enmeshment would be a specific risk factor for adolescents internalizing symptomatology and social problems. Alternatively, disengaged relationships reflect thick, impermeable, or overly rigid boundaries that afford little or no access to warmth, support, or other relationship resources. The interpersonal distance in disengaged relationships is reflected in cold, indifferent, callous, or unfriendly interactions. Hostility is commonly evident in disengaged relationships. It does not share the same functions as enmeshment in creating greater emotional entanglement. Rather, the hostility and anger characteristic of disengagement serves to further push the siblings apart or promote psychological distance between them. Although disengaged relationships may have some adaptive benefits, limiting exposure to incompatible relationships, the emotionally cold and indifferent climate of sibling relationships has been theorized to increase tendencies to downplay the significance of relationships and engender a dismissing pattern of coping characteristic by interpersonal disregard, rejection, alienation, and externalizing problems. Davies et al. 2004, Carrig 1995, Surjapel et al. 2010. Supporting the prevalence and proposed implications of sibling disengagement, Hetherington 1988 identified a hostile, alienated group of siblings who avoided each other's company as much as possible and were cold or actively complaining, critical, and aggressive when they did interact, and exhibited elevated externalizing symptomatology. Therefore, we further postulate that sibling disengagement will evidence distinct associations with adolescents' externalizing problems. Our distinction between boundary disturbances is designed to generate incremental precision in and novelty in the prediction of children's adjustment beyond the broad discrimination of sibling peer relationships into inherently positive warmth and negative conflict units. Consideration of both form and function in defining sibling relationship behaviors is specifically intended to obtain a different level of understanding of how children experience sibling relationships than social learning theory approaches. Defining warmth and conflict according to its phenotypical or structural characteristics does not specifically permit an understanding of the psychological meaning of these classes of behaviors within the broader organization of relationship behaviors and the overarching implicit rules of relating in the sibling dyad. For example, although some displays of warmth are manifestations of generally healthy, close sibling relationships, other apparent expressions of friendliness may reflect conditional attempts to entangle siblings in a way that undermine salient developmental goals. See Bing Het Hall, 2002, Errol and Berman, 1995. Likewise, previous unidimensional treatment of conflict or hostility in sibling literature cannot disentangle whether hostility serves the function of emotionally entangling, i.e., enmeshment, or estranging, disengagement siblings. If a boundary disturbance model of sibling relationships is distinctive in its utility as family systems theory postulates, then it should offer incremental power in accounting for individual differences in children's adjustment, even after considering the predictive role of prevailing measures of warmth and conflict. To provide a stringent test of the discriminant validity of our boundary disturbance conceptualization, we specifically examined whether sibling enmeshment and disengagement uniquely predicted adolescents' psychological adjustment patterns in analytic models that simultaneously considered sibling warmth and conflict as predictors. Because emerging evidence suggests that early adolescence may be a sensitive period for exhibiting susceptibility to sibling relationships, we examined the viability of our sibling disturbance model within a sample of young teens. As children navigate through the early period of adolescence, they must face the As children navigate through early adolescence, they must face the challenge of resolving a significant number of stage salient tasks, including the development of close friendships characterized by high levels of intimacy, self disclosure, and autonomy support. Bredgen et al. 2002, supportive peer networks, in addition, Conley, Furman, and Kanowski 2000, social perspective taking skills, Furman and Wiener Weiner, 1994, successfully coping with environmental, like school, and biological, like puberty, transitions. Guest, Reed, and Maston, 1999, and effective approaches for risk, for example, substance use, sexual relations, delinquency, management. Wendell and Davies, 1999. Given that these tasks are already challenging even within highly nurturing contexts, developmental models propose that patterns of adolescent adaptation emerging from the resolution of developmental tasks may be highly sensitive to the family relationship dynamics. Cummings, Davies, and Campbell, 2000. Sibling relationships may be particularly salient in this developmental context due to their considerable comparability with many of the peer relationship challenges: intimacy, disclosure, autonomy, support, and friendships, and peer networks in early adolescence. For example, sibling relationships closely resemble peer and friend relationships along key structural characteristics, including relatively equal balance of power and age similarity. Lorison, 1995, Stroff, Eaglin, Carlson, and Collins, 2005. Thus, adolescents may rely substantially on the sibling relationship experiences as prototypes for approaching many of the developmental tasks that underlie trajectories of adaptation and maladaptation. Several methodological features in this study were employed to increase the rigor in testing the primary hypothesis, first prompted by the predominant use of questionnaire assessments of sibling relationship quality. Uh, Heatherton, 1998, researchers have issued calls to develop a more diverse array of assessments. Noller, 2005, highlighting a pivotal approach to addressing this gap. Fees and Spagnola, 2005, argue that semi-structured interviews can provide a deep level of understanding of complex family processes by offering opportunities for individuals to impart personal meaning in responding to questions. Toward this objective, a new semi-structured interview was developed for caregivers designed to allow greater latitude in addressing central themes in their children's sibling relationships than the fixed items and response alternatives of questionnaires. The resulting rich narratives on sibling dynamics increase versatility in measurement by affording both conventional warmth and conflict and novel enmeshment disengagement assessments of sibling relationship dimensions. Second, our assessment of sibling relationships is also part of a broader measurement approach that circumvents the common limitation of shared method and informant variance by utilizing multiple methods: semi-structured interview, questionnaires, and informants, expert raters, parents, adolescents, teachers. Third, our aim was to extend the promising cross-sectional findings in earlier research, Hetherington, 1988, by utilizing a perspective designed to test whether sibling boundary disturbances predicted subsequent change in adolescent adjustment, even after inclusion of sibling warmth and conflict as predictors. As a conservative approach, a number of structural characteristics, sex, age of the sibling dyad, were specified as potential covariates in the models. Berenj et al., 2004, Brody, 1998, Hetherington, 1988. Uh, Michael. Yes. Can you get a water jug?